World War I. The beginning of the 20th century was, for the political balance of Europe, like the silence before a storm. With the completion of the unification it had always dreamed of, Bismarck's iron and blood policy, Wilhelm II's aggressive foreign policy, and the country's rising industrial power, Germany stepped onto the stage as a new force. This situation clashed with France's long-cherished desire for revenge, Britain's dominance over the seas, and Russia's pan-Slavism policy. The World War that began in 1914 was, in truth, not such a simple process, because this war changed not only the lives of millions of people but also maps, empires, and the history of humanity forever. For the first time in history, war was experienced not only at the front but also in homes, factories, plants, newspapers, and mines. This was a total war in which not only soldiers but also the civilian population took part directly. So how did this war begin? Who was fighting, and why? Who lost everything? And what were those mysterious and forgotten details that most of us have never heard of? In the end, what changed for the world? Let us take a look together at the background of this great war. The World War did not erupt in an instant. It was the result of years of rivalry, hostility, ambition, and fear. Its main causes can be summarized as follows: the wave of nationalism, the race for colonies, the arms race, and the complex web of alliances established between states but operating behind the curtain. But in this complex equation, the event that lit the fuse of the war was the killing of the Austro-Hungarian heir to the throne, Franz Ferdinand, by a Serbian nationalist in the city of Sarajevo in Bosnia. Yes, with a single bullet a great war began, and nothing in the world would be the same again. This assassination set all the tensions on the continent in motion at once. The Austro-Hungarian heir Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were killed by a Serbian nationalist. This assassination turned the tension that already existed in the Balkans into a great flame and, in a short time, became the spark of the World War that would drench the whole world in blood. First of all, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia. Because Serbia's response was deemed unsatisfactory, Austria-Hungary declared war on the 28th of July 1914. This event triggered the crisis that started the World War. Then, as if it had been waiting for this very moment, Germany declared war on Russia. This event caused the World War to spread rapidly. The German army sought to gain a strategic advantage by launching an offensive on the Eastern Front. On the other hand, the war had other interesting aspects as well. The Willy-Niki telegrams are the correspondence conducted at the very start of the World War between the German Emperor Wilhelm and the Russian Tsar Nicholas II with the aim of preserving peace. Although these telegrams, based on the personal closeness of the two cousins, were seen as an attempt to prevent the war, they came to nothing. Russia was supporting Serbia. Germany, in turn, stood beside Austria. France and Britain also joined the war on Russia's side. This was expected, as both had interests that clashed with Germany. France wanted to regain the lands it had earlier lost to Germany, while Britain saw Germany as a potential threat to itself. At the start of the war, Germany planned, through the Schlieffen Plan, to defeat France quickly. But when Britain entered the war as German forces passed through Belgium, things became complicated. On the Western Front, trench warfare began between Germany on one side and France and Britain on the other. On the Eastern Front, Germany and Austria came face to face with Russia. In the same period, the Ottoman state also felt that its very existence was at risk, and it thought that positive things would come if it stood on the winning side of this war. Thus the Ottomans too, at the end of 1914, entered the war alongside Germany, with which they had earlier established positive relations. On the Western Front, intense trench warfare was being fought on the soil of France and Belgium. In particular, the battles of Verdun and the Somme were among the bloodiest clashes in the history of humanity. On the Eastern Front, Germany and Austria-Hungary fought against Russia, the Gallipoli Front. Britain targeted the Dardanelles Strait in order to knock the Ottomans out of the war and to establish a connection with Russia. The Russians, for their part, saw the straits as a strategic target for reaching the warm seas. The fall of the straits could change both the military and the political balance. For this reason, Gallipoli was a strategic key point for the Entente powers. On the 18th of March 1915, the Entente fleet tried to pass through the Dardanelles. But thanks to the Ottoman artillery and the mines laid by the minelayer Nusrat, the fleet suffered heavy losses and was forced to withdraw. Unable to pass by sea, the Entente powers turned to a land operation. This became a critical turning point in the Battle of Gallipoli. The Gallipoli operation, despite the joint efforts of land, sea, and air forces, did not achieve success. After the failure of the Gallipoli operation, Churchill was removed from his post, while on the Turkish side Mustafa Kemal shone as a savior and hero. The Caucasus Front. In this battle the Ottomans fought against the Russians. The Sarajevo tragedy also took place right here. The Turks suffered very heavy losses at Sarajevo. The Syria-Palestine Front. The British, by supporting the Arab revolts, waged a struggle against the Ottomans. Lawrence, who moved about in Arab dress, was rousing the Arab tribes to rise against the Ottomans, and the war was now continuing not only with weapons but also with espionage, propaganda, and promises. In the same period, history was written on another front, in the territory of present-day Iraq. In 1916, the Ottoman army besieged the British units under the command of General Townshend and won a victory. Yet despite this victory, the Entente was in a very good position in the overall course of the war. The war was experienced not only in Europe but also in Africa, the Middle East, and even the Far East. The World War also struck Germany's colonies in Africa. In Cameroon, despite 15 months of resistance, the French, British, and Belgians seized the region. Togoland passed to the French, Cameroon to the British. Namibia was occupied by South Africa. German East Africa, in turn, came under the control of British, Belgian, and Portuguese forces in 1916. In the Pacific, the clashes between Japan and Germany formed the unseen face of the global war. The World War was the first modern and bloody war in history fought between industrialized countries. However much swords and bayonets were still used, swords and bayonets had already given way to technology, machine guns, tanks, aircraft, submarines, chemical weapons, even mustard gas, weapons of mass destruction were being used for the first time. In this war, reconnaissance was carried out for the first time with flying spies and air balloons. During the World War, Zeppelins were used for military purposes. Germany managed to make effective use of these aerial vehicles for reconnaissance flights and air raids. On the other hand, those who could intercept radio communications and read ciphers were able to change the course of the war in an instant. Interestingly, letter-carrying pigeons, message-carrying dogs, and even elephants serving at the front were used. Beyond this, trench life resembled a true hell for the soldiers. Disease, hunger, and psychological ruin were the darkest part of the war. In the World War, at the front it was bullets that spoke, while in the cities it was words and images. Postcards, the most widespread propaganda tool of the war, were sent millions of times in order to raise the morale of soldiers, to motivate the public, and to belittle the enemy. Posters, newspapers, schools, and theaters also served this purpose. States believed that inspiring people toward victory would be very effective. The message that the war was justified was given to every layer of society. On this invisible front, the true victory was to win the minds and hearts of the people. The United States had chosen to remain neutral at the beginning of the World War, but over time, Germany's submarine attacks, especially the targeting of American ships, were bringing patience to its end. In 1917, despite warnings from the U.S., Germany continued to attack neutral ships. The sinking of an American ship was the final drop that overflowed the cup of patience. President Wilson stated that these attacks could no longer be ignored and, appealing to Congress, brought forward the question of joining the war. On the 2nd of April 1917, the United States officially declared war on Germany. This historic decision changed not only the course of the war but the fate of the 20th century and even our present day. By 1918, Germany surrendered. On the 11th of November 1918, the war came to an end. Millions of people died in the war. Empires collapsed. The Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, Russia, and Germany. New states were founded and maps were redrawn. The Treaty of Versailles imposed heavy penalties on Germany. It was precisely this that prepared the ground for the Second World War. The World War is not only a piece of the past but the beginning of the events that shape today's world. After the World War, a great many empires collapsed and new states were founded. In society, great social changes occurred, from gender roles to class structure. While America came to the fore in the economy, in technology, aircraft, tanks, chemical weapons, and propaganda tools were used intensively. The war left deep marks not only at the front but in every sphere of society. In order to learn from history, we must not forget the causes and consequences of this war. Don't forget to subscribe for new videos.